What does it really mean to wear a crown? Is it power or pressure? Is it glory or a slow, invisible trap? History tells us one thing: the crown does not protect you, it tests you. For nearly 1,000 years, England has been ruled by kings and queens who believed their power came from God. But time and again, that belief collided with reality: war, disease, ambition, betrayal, and fear. How did the English crown survive centuries of chaos, while so many of its rulers did not? To understand, we must go back to a time when England was still finding its place in the world. By the 14th century, England was no longer a quiet island. It was becoming a military power. At the center of this rise stood King Edward III, a warrior king who would rule for over 50 years. Under Edward, England challenged France itself, launching what would become known as the 100 Years' War. It was ambitious, it was expensive, and it would change England forever. But before swords and crowns could decide the kingdom's fate, something far deadlier arrived. In 1348, the Black Death reached England, and nothing, no army, no king, no church was prepared. Entire towns collapsed. Families vanished overnight. Between 1/3 and half of Europe's population died. How do you rule a country when half of your people are gone? The plague didn't just kill people, it killed the old system. With farms abandoned and labor scarce, peasants suddenly had leverage. Landlords were forced to change how they worked their land. Fields once filled with crops became pastures for sheep. Wool replaced grain, money replaced obligation. For the first time in generations, people who had been tied to the land were free to move. A new class was born: free laborers. This wasn't just an economic shift, it was a social revolution. Edward III survived the storm. His reign ended with England stronger, wealthier, and more confident than before. But stability never lasts long in royal history. When Edward died in 1377, the crown passed not to a hardened warrior, but to a child. Richard II was just 10 years old when he became king. Power fell into the hands of nobles, regents, and advisors, most notably John of Gaunt, one of the most powerful men in England. The kingdom was exhausted. War with France drained the treasury. The plague had shattered trust, and the people were being pushed too far. To fund the war, the government introduced a poll tax, a flat tax that hit the poor hardest. And this time, the people snapped. In 1381, tens of thousands of peasants marched on London. They burned palaces. They killed royal officials. They demanded freedom. This wasn't a riot. It was a warning. The crown ruled only as long as the people allowed it. Richard II survived the rebellion, but he never recovered politically. Distrust followed him for the rest of his reign. Slowly, quietly, the idea began to take hold. A king could be removed, and once that idea exists, it never goes away. Over the next century, England would descend into civil war, betrayal, and bloodshed. Brothers would fight brothers. Cousins would fight cousins. Kings would be crowned and cut down, all leading to one brutal truth: the crown is never inherited peacefully for long, because next, England will tear itself apart in a struggle so violent, so personal, that it will become known as the War of the Roses. But before we go there, ask yourself this: if kings are chosen by God, why do so many of them die by human hands? If the peasants' revolt cracked the illusion of royal power, the next century would shatter it completely. England was about to learn a brutal lesson. The most dangerous enemy to a kingdom is itself. By the mid-1400s, England's ruling family, the Plantagenets, was tearing itself apart. Two branches of the same royal bloodline rose against each other. The House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose. The House of York, symbolized by a white rose. Both claimed the crown. Both believed God was on their side, and both were willing to kill for it. For over 30 years, England descended into civil war. Kings were captured. Kings were executed. Loyalty meant nothing, because today's ally could be tomorrow's executioner. How do you rule a country when no one knows who will be king next year? Out of this chaos emerged one of history's most controversial figures, Richard III. When his brother, King Edward IV, died suddenly in 1483, the crown should have passed to Edward's young sons. Instead, Richard stepped in as Lord Protector, and then everything changed. The young princes were declared illegitimate. Richard was crowned king, and the boys were placed in the Tower of London. They were never seen again. To this day, the princes in the tower remain one of history's greatest mysteries. Were they murdered? Did they escape? Or were they quietly erased to secure the crown? One thing is certain. Richard III's rule began under a cloud of suspicion and fear. Richard was a capable military commander, but politically, his support was fragile. Nobles who once backed him began to hesitate. Old alliances cracked. Whispers of rebellion spread. One name rose above the rest: Henry Tudor, a man with a weak claim but strong backing. Exiled in France, Henry gathered an army and crossed the Channel in 1485, aiming to take the crown by force. Everything would come down to a single battle. On August 22, 1485, two armies met near Bosworth Field. Richard III had more men, more experience, and the crown already on his head. But Henry Tudor had something else: undecided allies. As the fighting raged, key nobles, most famously the Stanley family, waited, watching, calculating. Then Richard made a fatal decision. Seeing Henry exposed, the king charged directly at him, hoping to end the battle in one strike. It almost worked, but at the critical moment the Stanleys switched sides. Richard was surrounded, unhorsed, and killed in battle. He became the last English king to die on the battlefield. With him, the Plantagenet dynasty ended. How powerful is a crown if it can be taken in the mud by betrayal? Henry Tudor was crowned Henry VII on the battlefield itself. Victory was only the beginning. England was exhausted, bankrupt, and deeply divided. Henry understood one thing clearly: if the crown was to survive, it needed stability, not glory. He married Elizabeth of York, uniting the red and white roses and ending the Civil War in name and symbol. The Tudor dynasty had begun. Henry VII was not flashy. He was not loved, but he was effective. He crushed pretenders, rebuilt the treasury, strengthened royal authority. Most importantly, he made rebellion expensive and loyalty profitable. For the first time in decades, England had peace, but peace came with a price. Because Henry's obsession with stability created something dangerous. A crown passed to a son who had never known chaos, a son raised in comfort, a son who believed the crown existed to serve him. His name was Henry VIII. And here's the question we're heading toward. What happens when absolute power falls into reckless hands? Henry VIII is one of history's most famous kings, but here's the truth: he was never meant to rule. That role belonged to his older brother Arthur, Prince of Wales. Arthur was trained to lead. Henry was trained to enjoy life, hunting, music, sport. A spare prince with no real responsibilities. Until 1502, when Arthur died suddenly. Overnight, the future of England changed. When Henry VIII took the throne in 1509, he didn't look like a tyrant. He was young, athletic, educated, and charismatic. Europe admired him. England adored him. Henry was a gifted musician, spoke multiple languages, and was deeply religious. In fact, he earned the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope himself. So how did a king praised by the church become the man who shattered it? Henry married Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, with the Pope's permission. For years, the marriage seemed stable, but there was one problem: no surviving male heir. Catherine had given him only one living child, a daughter, Mary. In Tudor England, that terrified the king. Civil war was still a living memory. A weak succession could destroy everything his father had built. Henry turned to Anne Boleyn. Anne refused to be his mistress. She demanded marriage, and that demand changed history. Henry asked the Pope to annul his marriage to Catherine. The Pope refused. For the first time, Henry realized something dangerous. The crown answered to Rome, and Henry did not like answering to anyone. In 1534, Henry pushed Parliament to pass the Act of Supremacy, declaring the king, not the Pope, the head of the Church of England. This was revolutionary, not for reform but for control. Those who refused loyalty paid with their lives. Even Sir Thomas More, one of Henry's closest advisors, was executed. Faith was now enforced by the sword. Henry married Anne Boleyn. She gave him a daughter, Elizabeth, no son. Anne was accused of treason and executed. Next came Jane Seymour, who gave Henry a son, Edward. Jane died after childbirth. The remaining marriages were quick and dark. Anne of Cleves divorced. Catherine Howard executed. Catherine Parr survived. By the end, Henry was no longer the Golden King. He was paranoid, obese, ruthless. The crown no longer restrained him. It obeyed him. When Henry VIII died in 1547, he believed he had succeeded. He had a male heir. He controlled the church. He had absolute authority, but he left behind a kingdom divided by religion, fear, and instability. His heir was only 9 years old. Next, England would learn something terrifying. Breaking from the church was easy. Living with the consequences was not. When Henry VIII died, England did not inherit a strong ruler. It inherited a child. Edward VI was just 9 years old when he became king. Once again, the crown sat on a young head, while others ruled in his name. Edward had been raised entirely Protestant. Unlike his father, who broke with Rome for power, Edward's government believed in religious reform. Under the control of regents, especially Edward Seymour, England changed fast. Catholic Mass was abolished. Church services were rewritten. The Book of Common Prayer replaced centuries of tradition. For some, this was progress. For others, it was heresy. How do you force belief on an entire nation without breaking it? Edward was sickly. Everyone knew it. As his health failed, fear spread through the government. If Edward died, the crown would pass to his older sister Mary, a devout Catholic. To prevent that, Edward's advisors made a reckless move. They changed the line of succession. They placed the crown on Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant teenager. She would rule for just 9 days. The plan failed. The people supported Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's daughter by Catherine of Aragon. Mary entered London as queen in 1553. She restored Catholicism. She reunited England with Rome, and she sought to erase Protestant reform by force. Hundreds were burned at the stake, men, women, even bishops. Mary believed she was saving souls. But let me ask you, is persecution still evil if it's done in the name of God? Mary married Philip of Spain, tying England to a foreign Catholic power. The marriage was deeply unpopular, and she produced no heir. Her reign became defined by loss, sickness, and disappointment. When Mary died in 1558, the crown passed to her sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth Tudor had survived her father's court, her sister's prisons, and decades of suspicion. Now she wore the crown. She did not rule through fear. She ruled through balance. Elizabeth restored Protestantism, but avoided extremism. She stabilized the economy. She outmaneuvered foreign threats. Most importantly, she refused to marry. Elizabeth understood power. A husband would mean shared rule. Shared rule meant weakness. She became a queen married to her country. Her reign ushered in cultural growth, exploration, and national confidence. England began to see itself as a global power. But even Elizabeth could not escape one problem. She had no heir. And that brings us to the question that haunted every Tudor ruler. What happens when a dynasty ends, but the crown remains? In 1603, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in nearly a century, England welcomed a new dynasty without bloodshed. The Tudor line had ended, and the crown passed north to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England. James believed deeply in one idea, the divine right of kings. To him, the king answered only to God, not Parliament, not the people. James was intelligent, educated, and ambitious, but he was also careless with money, dismissive of Parliament, and convinced of his own absolute authority. Tension began to rise. James's son, Charles I, inherited not just the throne but all its problems. Charles ruled without Parliament. He raised taxes illegally. He enforced religion harshly, and he refused compromise. What happens when a king refuses to listen? By 1642, England was at war with itself. On one side, the royalists loyal to the king. On the other, the parliamentarians led by Oliver Cromwell. The fighting was brutal. Families were split. Towns were destroyed. Faith and politics collided violently. Slowly, the king lost. In 1649, Charles I was put on trial, not by a foreign enemy but by his own people. He was found guilty of treason. And then, something no English king had ever faced. The axe fell. The crown was shattered. England became a republic. The monarchy was abolished. Cromwell ruled as Lord Protector. Power did not become gentler. It became stricter. England traded one form of tyranny for another. After Cromwell's death, the country had had enough. They wanted the crown back. In 1660, the monarchy returned. Charles II, son of the executed king, took the throne. The crown was restored but weakened. Everyone had learned the lesson. A king could be killed, and the balance of power had shifted forever. But the story wasn't over. Soon, England would face another question: who should rule, the king or the law? By the late 1600s, England had learned a painful lesson. Absolute power was dangerous. The crown could no longer rule alone. In 1688, King James II, a Catholic monarch in a Protestant nation, pushed England too far. He bypassed Parliament, ignored tradition, placed Catholics in positions of power. Fear spread. This time, England did something unusual. They invited an invasion. Parliament asked William of Orange and his wife Mary, James's Protestant daughter, to take the throne. James fled. Almost no blood was spilled. It became known as the Glorious Revolution. But the real revolution wasn't the king. It was the paperwork. In 1689, Parliament passed the English Bill of Rights. For the first time, the monarch could not suspend laws. Taxes required parliamentary approval. Standing armies needed consent. The crown still existed, but it was no longer supreme. William and Mary ruled together. Power shifted toward Parliament. Something new was born: constitutional monarchy. The crown now symbolized stability, not domination. After William and Mary, Queen Anne took the throne. In 1707, England and Scotland officially united. The United Kingdom of Great Britain was born. A new flag, the Union Jack, flew over a new nation. But Anne had no surviving children. Once again, the question of succession returned. To prevent a Catholic monarch, the crown passed to George I of Hanover. George barely spoke English. Disinterested in ruling, he handed real power to ministers. This gave rise to something revolutionary: the Prime Minister. Parliament was now in charge. The crown had been tamed. Even restrained, the monarchy would face new challenges. The world was changing, empires were rising, and Britain was about to rule one. By the 18th century, Britain was no longer simply a kingdom. It was an empire. Its ships crossed every ocean. Its flag flew on distant shores. Its influence reached continents the crown would never see. So vast was this empire that a phrase was born to describe it: the sun never sets on the British Empire. But beneath the grandeur lay a quiet transformation, because while Britain ruled the world, the crown no longer ruled Britain. Under the Hanoverian kings, Britain expanded at breathtaking speed. Trade flourished. Colonies multiplied. The Royal Navy commanded the seas, yet real power had shifted. Parliament governed. Ministers decided. The monarch observed. Kings like George I and George II reigned, but did not rule. They became symbols rather than commanders. And in time, that limitation became the monarchy's greatest strength. At home, Britain was changing just as radically. Fields gave way to factories. Muscle was replaced by steam. Small towns became vast industrial cities. Wealth surged. So did inequality. Children labored underground. Workers endured brutal hours. Disease spread through crowded streets. Progress had a price, and it was not paid by the powerful. In 1837, the crown passed to a young woman. Her name was Victoria. She would reign for 63 years, longer than any monarch before her. Under her name, Britain reached the height of its global influence. But Victoria ruled differently from the kings of the past. She did not command armies. She did not govern directly. She advised. She influenced. She symbolized. The crown had become something new, a moral force rather than a political one. Victoria's power did not come from law or force. It came from image. She embodied stability, family, continuity. The monarchy survived by changing, by stepping back instead of pushing forward. And for a time, it worked. For more than 60 years, one woman defined Britain. Her death didn't just end a reign, it ended an era. In 1901, Queen Victoria dies, and the world's most powerful empire is suddenly forced to change. What followed would quietly reshape the British crown forever. Edward VII, the king who modernized the crown. Edward VII waited almost his entire life to become king. As Prince of Wales, he wasn't trapped in palaces. He traveled the world, mixed with foreign leaders, and learned how power really worked. And when he finally took the throne, he ruled nothing like his mother. Edward turned the monarchy outward. He supported charities, opened hospitals and schools, and transformed royal appearances into public spectacles. For the first time, the British crown felt visible. But here's the twist: Edward had almost no legal power. Parliament ruled Britain now, so Edward ruled through charm. Behind closed doors, he built alliances, eased tensions, and earned the nickname the Peacemaker. While Edward polished the image of the crown, Britain itself was cracking beneath the surface. The real battle wasn't overseas, it was at home. Factories expanded, cities exploded, and the working class demanded change. Education improved, trade unions grew stronger, socialism entered parliament. When the government tried to tax the wealthy to fund social programs, the House of Lords blocked it, triggering a constitutional crisis. The old elite resisted change. The country felt unstable. In 1910, Edward VII died suddenly. His reign had been short, but its impact was permanent. The crown passed to a man who never expected to wear it. George V was the second son, trained for the Navy, not the throne. But fate intervened. Now King George faced a world growing darker by the day. His cousins ruled Europe: the German Kaiser and the Russian Tsar. They had grown up together, and soon they would go to war against each other. When World War I erupted, Britain was thrown into chaos. Anti-German anger forced George to make a historic decision. He erased the royal family's German name and rebranded it as the House of Windsor. He survived war, revolution, and unrest, turning the monarchy into a symbol of national unity. But the crown's greatest test was still coming. Royal drama alert. Edward VIII takes the throne and immediately blows it up. He's got one question: love or duty? The answer shocks the world. Edward VIII fell in love with Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American. Marrying her meant breaking royal protocol, risking the monarchy's political neutrality, and yes, almost toppling centuries of tradition. Edward chose love, abdicated in less than a year, and suddenly, George VI, the reluctant king, had to step up. George VI had a stutter, wasn't confident, and never expected to be king. But the world was changing fast. He had to lead Britain through World War II, inspire a nation under Blitz bombs, and keep morale high. He stayed in London during air raids, shared in rationing, and became a symbol of unity, a king who truly lived with his people. George formed a legendary partnership with Winston Churchill, meeting every week to strategize against Hitler. His leadership became a blueprint for modern monarchy, humble, relatable, yet steadfast in duty. After World War II, the monarchy faced new challenges, rebuilding a shattered Britain, guiding decolonization, and transitioning the empire into the modern Commonwealth. George VI handled it with grace, paving the way for the future queen, his daughter Elizabeth II. But life wasn't easy. The stress of war and illness took a toll, and by 1952, the crown passed to a 25-year-old Elizabeth. She would go on to become the longest-reigning British monarch ever. From a young queen to a global icon, Elizabeth II didn't just inherit a crown, she inherited a world in chaos, and she ruled like no one else. She modernized the monarchy, embraced technology, and connected with the public like no king or queen before her. Televised coronation, international tour, and even visits to China and communist countries. Elizabeth showed the crown could adapt to the modern world. But family drama never stopped. Divorces, scandals, and the tragedy of Princess Diana tested her reign. Through it all, she stayed composed, letting the crown endure while keeping public trust intact. During her reign, the empire transformed into the Commonwealth. Nations gained independence, Britain joined the European community, and the monarchy's political power shrank, but its prestige remained. Elizabeth adapted to every challenge, from assassination attempts to media scrutiny, always maintaining dignity. Fast forward to 2023, Charles III becomes king at 73, the oldest to ever take the throne. He inherits a nation in flux: Brexit, social tension, economic woes, and an evolving role of the monarchy. Charles is more vocal, eco-conscious, and reform-minded, but he also faces family drama, public scrutiny, and the question: Can he keep the crown relevant in the 21st century? Only time will tell, but one thing's clear. The British monarchy is far from over, and the next chapter is just beginning. From Victoria to Charles, over 200 years of drama, duty, and transformation. The crown has survived it all. But the real story, that's still being written. There's honestly so much more to this story, but I hope you liked this quick rundown of the British monarchy. If you're down, we could turn this into a full 2-hour documentary. If you're vibing with this, smash that like button and subscribe for more awesome documentaries.